is that right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shit. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We'll be getting started in about 3 to 5 minutes.
Got it now.
All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you for attending the meeting. What we're doing now, and I'm going to be, Darren is on the phone. I'm going to ask Darren, do you want to start, and then we'll just add to it. Darren, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm in the car, so I think just kicking it off, saying obviously we're going to go over the new rules, and I know that we've got a new policy for the office disclosure policy to go over. That's kind of the big overview. But Mike, if y'all have got that in front of you, I think it'd be best for y'all to run with it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to start from the beginning, and then we're going to talk about the form. Kim has got it ready. It's going to be in dot loop, but the forms, what we're talking about, let me see if I can get this thing going. All right. Everybody's heard about HB 230, and HB 230 is not just a license law. It is an Alabama law, and it's a law that amends the real estate practices to ensure uh, disclosure and transparency between the consumer and the real estate professional. A little history: everybody was, because of the NAR settlement, people were really getting messed up, feeling like they had to have an agreement signed before they looked at the house. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people that said you have to have a written agreement, which was either a buyer agency or transaction broker agreement to show the house, which was incorrect. So, what HB 230 does, it clarifies that. It takes effect tomorrow. So, that's why we waited to the last minute so we could get everything done. What's going to change is, as of tomorrow, no more showing agreement is needed. However, what is going to be needed is recading and this new document. And you're going to have to explain recad, and you're going to have to explain the office policy. And then you'll see in the office policy, it talks about Capstone's office policy for agency, or basically representation of the consumer. You're going to have those two documents signed before you can open the door. So no more showing agreement. However, recad at the time of meeting and this new document. The next part that's changing is, and you'll see here at the bottom, this point two. Try to move everything. It says that. Move back. All right. Number two, written agreement. A written brokerage agreement is required before a licensee can list a property for sale or submit an offer on behalf of a consumer. However, consumers are not obligated to enter into that written agreement to view properties. So, what, again, clarifying, no showing agreement is needed as of tomorrow. However, you have to recad them and then inform them of our policy, how we can represent them, and have that document signed. Then, if you're working with the seller, the listing agreement is a written agreement. You can have that signed, enter it into the MLS. What's changed is, if you are submitting an offer for a buyer and you're going to represent this buyer as a buyer agency, proceed on. You have a buyer agency agreement submitted with the offer, or not submitted, but you have to have that document. What's going to change is, if you are representing the buyer as a transaction broker. If you're representing them as a transaction broker, there's going to be a transaction broker agreement that you're going to have signed. Ordinarily, we just went on, if we were going to represent the buyer as a transaction broker, we didn't have a document signed. But as you see, it says a written brokerage agreement is required before a licensee can list a property, no change there, or submit an offer on behalf of a consumer. Are there any questions? If there's questions, please type it into the chat and we'll look at it.
So basically, just kind of breaking this down in simple terms, showing agreement no longer needed. You're going to start to see something called the ADOP, is pretty much how our industry has abbreviated this, and it's the Agent Disclosure Office Policy. So that's that document that is now required. When you go to show a property, you're going to have to present this ADOP that Capstone Realty has put together based on the verbiage approved by the state, and your recad prior to showing the home. And this now becomes a part of your paperwork package. So you're going to have to get that signed and upload that to paperless with your contract document. So no more showing agreement. You're looking for this ADOP. We've really tried to go based on what the state has approved and told us. So that verbiage is a little looser than what this showing agreement has. So hopefully that means that business as usual is just going to become a little bit easier to not have to have those awkward conversations up front. But the law does require each company to distribute our agency disclosure office policy, or ADOP, to all licensees in the company, explain it to them, and ask each person to sign an acknowledgement that they have received it. So after this, at some point in the next few days, you'll get a dot loop link to sign an acknowledgement. If you don't mind, we would really appreciate it if you would just sign that and send it back so that everything as we roll this out is in compliance. Any questions so far? Nope, nothing.
The document.
Um,
Wait a minute.
yes, so we have that document ready to go. It's going to be in dot loop and fillable by the end of today because this does take place effective tomorrow. So you'll see that in there. There's a transaction broker agreement that is already in there. It's the state version. We are waiting for the board to sign off on that and hope that that comes through between now and then. But if not, if you're needing a transaction broker agreement to prepare an offer and you do not have a buyer agency agreement in place, there is a transaction broker agreement already in dot loop now, and we'll just roll that over when we get the approved version from the board.
I'm going to try and bring up the document. All right. Still no questions. All right, so bear with me. We're trying to get that form to be pulled up so we can show it to everybody. Still no- I appreciate y'all's patience. Okay, why the change and what made them do away with the showing document? Great question. What happened was, again, many people were taking advantage of this written agreement that NAR said that they were going to send to us. I mean, that we had to have signed before we could show. In a lot of states, a written agreement, and just like in Alabama, a written agreement is a brokerage agreement. So they were using this to sign buyers into agency agreements as opposed to just getting permission to show the property. So Alabama went ahead and clarified it to say that the written agreement is either going to be a transaction broker agreement or uh, the transaction broker agreement or the uh, buyer agency. All right. So now
One more question here. So I have a question. Can they refuse to sign? So you're going to follow the same practices that you follow as RECAD. This is not a contract. So yes, they can refuse to sign, but you're going to have to still write on the bottom that the consumer refused to sign the document, sign that, and still have that uploaded in with all of your paperwork.
all right, so let me ask, can everybody, somebody just chat, type in yes? Can you see the document? Okay. Okay, I got yes and no. You can't read the document. Okay, let me. How about now?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So as you see, the document, basically the first part is going to be going over RECAD again. The second, right below that, remember, we're going to have to address compensation. We're not going to talk about the amount of compensation, but you talk, and we have a description in there for the seller. Read it and explain to them that for your services, there will be compensation. Buyers, the same thing. We either charge a flat fee or a percentage of the sales price. Notice there is no dollar amount or no number amount, percentage amount, or anything. It just addresses the subject of compensation. We wanted to keep it as simple as we possibly can. This will be condensed on one page, but does everybody see the gist of this? Any questions about this? Okay. Courtney, on this, with this going into effect tomorrow, will offers listings done prior to? No. It doesn't have to go retroactive. Anything dated 4/18. Now this puts an emphasis on not waiting until the time of offer to recad. Because remember, dot loop will find you out. Make sure that you get the recad signed and this ADOP signed if you haven't had a consultation and have a buyer agency. If you've had a buyer agency agreement signed, this is not applicable. This again is for the sign calls, the floor calls where you have not had time to have them sign a buyer agency agreement.
And the great thing about this form is it does kind of condense your recad conversation and your agency disclosure office policy conversation into one streamlined conversation. So just everything is there on this form. Just don't forget to get both of those forms signed at the first meeting or the first consultation together if possible.
Any other questions? And again, let me emphasize, as of tomorrow, these documents are going to be required as if you submit an offer, you submit all your paperwork into paperless. You are going to have this document if you don't have a buyer agency agreement. Even if you meet them on the porch and later get a buyer agency agreement, you're going to need these documents. Again, we put it in for the sellers. Rarely are you going to have to represent the seller without a listing agreement, but this would come into effect if you're working with a FSBO. If you're selling a for sale by owner, you're going to need these two documents because chances are they're not going to sign a listing agreement. No questions?
I do have a question, or I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to make sure I understand that I have to have both of those documents signed if I have a new buyer. Now, what if I just got 2 listing agreements signed this week? Do I need to go back and
No,
get
ma'am.
these to put into dot loop?
Remember, it just said it starts
Because,
tomorrow. Doesn't
right,
go back.
because of
It's
the
not
date.
retroactive.
Right, because of the date. Okay, the date of the listing agreement is going to make it okay. But we
Remember,
do
if you
have
get a
to,
listing agreement, you don't have to have these two documents. Okay? Because you're going to have the signed agreement.
right, but they're not gonna, I mean, you're not gonna put them in dot loop anyway until you have a signed agreement.
Correct.
So,
But you're
but
going
after
on the
tomorrow,
listing presentation, you're not meeting them without an agreement signed. You're going to get an agreement signed before you put it into the MLS. This
correct.
is this is mainly applicable if you have that signed call or you're meeting somebody without having a buyer agency agreement signed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Oh, holding an open house. Again, nothing changes. If you're holding an open house, you're working for the seller, so you don't have to recad or anybody, people coming in. Only when you are showing. Any other questions? Go ahead and address this again when it will be in the transaction.
All right, all hearts and minds clear. So this document will be in Dotloop for your use effective tomorrow with signature blocks as a one-page PDF. I'll drop it in your buyer paperwork, your listing paperwork, and any loop templates that you might need to find it. So we'll try to make it as user friendly and as easy as possible. And then again, the other big change that we need to remember is that when you write an offer, even if you are only representing as a transaction broker, we have to now have that transaction broker agreement or a buyer agency agreement in place with your paperwork prior to making an offer or moving forward.
Somebody said, did you see my question? And I don't know who it is. It just says iPhone. If you typed a question and we haven't answered it, let's see, write it here. Okay. Do you have to do this with family members, friends, parents that might attend the show? Great question. To err on the side of safety, just really the buyer. Because I was going to say have everybody sign it, but you're going to be going into, if you write an offer, it's going to be in that person's name. So just make sure that you get that person who's going to be the potential buyer to sign it. Any other questions? Again, if something pops up, we'll be free. You can send myself or Kim a text, email, something like that. We'll be glad to answer. So again, let me recap. As of tomorrow, no showing agreements will need to be signed. But if you are meeting a buyer on the porch without an agreement, a buyer agency agreement signed, then you are going to have these two documents signed, and they're going to have to be turned in with your paperwork. This is more applicable for buyers. Again, when we had the showing agreement, it was mainly for buyers. The only time you would need these are going to be if you're showing a for sale by owner.
Another question, how would you explain this? Mike, do you want to role play like how you would go through the RECAD and then the office disclosure policy?
Okay. Hi. There's been a new Alabama law taking place April 18th. Since we haven't had time to establish an agency agreement, the law requires that I recad you, that is to disclose the different ways that I can represent you in a real estate transaction. Also, an additional form talks about our office policy, how we represent at Capstone. Plus, we talk about the compensation aspect of it if this goes into a contract. You go through and talk about your representation. You address for sellers, you can read that, explain it. For the buyers, read that, explain it, and then say, if you will, please sign right here. This is a non-binding form. This is just a disclosure. Anything? Again, you recad them, explain how you represent. This is our office policy. This is how we represent. And this talks about the compensation if this ripens into a contract.
Hey, Mike, just so I understand, um, if this is not required during an open house, but then that buyer ends up wanting to write an offer later on and uses you as a transaction broker, we then have it signed at that time since it wasn't required at the open house, correct?
Remember, you're going to have at that time, if they're walking in through an open house, you're doing, as they call, ministerial duties for the seller. If they want to sit down and write an offer, you don't have to go back and do this. You're going to have recad them, but you're also going to get it if you're not going to represent them as an agent, you're going to have a transaction broker agreement. Then you write the offer, yada, yada, yada. Does that answer your question, Katie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, folks? Okay.
If we have a buyer's agency agreement, do we need the ADOP?
No. Remember, this document is only in effect if you have not gotten a buyer agency agreement signed or even a transaction broker agreement signed prior to showing the property. Are we good? Well, all right. This will be posted later. We've recorded it. So if you have any questions, you can go back and review it. Or if you feel like it, just drop us an email, a text, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Again, I just explained this. You don't really have to change if you have the showing agreement. You don't have to change it because remember it's prior to April 18th.
Mike, I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is regarding new construction. So we will have our model homes set as open houses daily. How does this affect the other houses in our communities that we have open? We don't necessarily have those set as open houses daily. Do we need to start making sure that every house that's
Yes,
open
ma'am.
is set as open house?
If a house is advertised as an open house, you're performing duties for the seller, you're good. Now, again, if you have any questions, you can call the Real Estate Commission or even AAR. But yeah, I don't know. I know just because you open the doors in a subdivision, I know new construction is always a little bit different. If you advertise as an open house, anybody that walks in, you don't have to have this sign. To be safe, if you have another house that has the door open and you're going to show them that house, I would have these two documents signed.
Okay.
And Amber, for your showings tomorrow, you don't have to explain the difference in the documents because if it's the same buyer and your showing agreement should cover that until you get them into a consultation, number one. Number two, if this is a call that you received today for a showing tomorrow, then yes, carry these two documents. You don't have to explain the difference or why it changed. You just explain, as of today, this is the law. Okay? Are we good? I thank y'all. Again, if there's any kind of questions or comments, Kim and I are always available. Y'all have a great day.